Hello, this is Natalie Changlin. I'm going to be walking our class through an interactive workshop presentation for English language learners and how we can best accommodate them in the realm of school counseling, and then there will be some also suggestions for classroom teachers as well. So on our agenda today are two big focus points. We're going to be kind of focusing on what is important to know about second language acquisition and bilingualism, basically the process of how our English language learners are literally absorbing, learning, and kind of speaking, writing, listening, all these kinds of things that's happening in their brain, the process of learning another language. Especially in an educational setting. And then on top of that, we'll dive into how and why family engagement differs across different cultures. This is something that's extremely important, especially in the role of a counselor, because we are going to be the ones often that connect with the families and connect with the students. And it's I kind of picked these two topics for our agenda because our first one talks more about nature and how we acquire language, what the scientific processes are that goes through our brain. And then our second one, family engagement, we're talking more about nurture. So I like the idea of contrasting these two thoughts and kind of how we can put these together to create the best environment for our students. So before we dive in, you have a handout of key terms here. These are those terms that in education we have so many acronyms that will present themselves all over. So we have DACA. If you ever see that, that would be a student who was born in the United States, but maybe their family was here illegally. These children have some sort of legal protection from deportation. So their parents still may be subject to deportation, but these children are protected and they can stay here in the United States. ELL is an English language learner. That's usually the student that we're going to be talking about. Sorry about. So it is another acronym. ESOL, English to Students of Other Languages. This is a course or program designated for these English language learners to learn English. Some schools, kids have an ESOL class. Other schools, the kids may be pulled for a small group where they can kind of bridge the gap from their home language to English. They will learn, strategies to better read English, things like that. FET is the family engagement tool. This is something I learned about during a conference, a teacher educational conference that I went to this year. It's a step higher than a PTA. This is really getting families to come together to really talk about mental health needs in the school, to talk about common misconceptions, all kinds of things that go on in school that parents can either influence or have their say in, that kind of stuff. And then WIDA, I actually never even knew what WIDA stood for, but it is the World Class Instructional Design and Assessment given to English language learners to measure their abilities to speak, read, write, and listen in English. So there are 4 components. I'll get into the formula for how they are evaluated, but each kid gets a score 1 through 6 and kind of shows their proficiency in English. So continuing on, before we get into things, these were just some of our statistics that, they're eye-opening. The Center for Immigration Studies says that legal and illegal immigration immigrants in the United States grew 1.6 million from 2020 to 2021, which is astounding. The chances are that we are going to experience an ELL, if not many, in our classrooms and schools this year, just because of the sheer number. This one is a really recent statistic. So far in 2023, nearly 38,000 migrants have crossed the border from Mexico into the United States. That doesn't necessarily mean these are Mexican nationals. These are people that come from South America, Central America, and beyond. That's just they happen to cross in Mexico. And that stat was actually from May, so chances are it has increased. And then about 21.6% or 65.5 million US residents spoke a foreign language at home in 2016. Astounding. That just goes to show that English is not the national language. I mean, a majority of us speak English, but a growing number, and it's more than 20% speak another language at home. So our first activity, we're only going to watch probably a quarter of this 20-minute video. I want you to see how you do. Don't beat yourself up if you don't understand everything. And then Dr. Kilpatrick, from here, I will play this video. The goal is, she's speaking entirely in Spanish. It's about verb conjugations. It's not easy. So I wanted, kind of like the lecture video, to immerse our participants in a world that our English language learners are experiencing, where it might be very confusing to sit in a classroom. Yeah. So we ask how did they do? They get to share, and I just want to reinforce that it is confusing. It's great that we can have experiences like this so we understand better what our kids can do. I would ask the audience kind of suggestions they have, what would make it better, give tips about visual tools and kind of equating, different strategies to help English language learners in the classroom. So our first big topic is language acquisition. All of the research has pointed to the earlier the better. Those who learn 2 languages when beginning to speak in general show earlier concept development and creativity when solving problems. Basically, while we're learning a language, we are expanding our brains. And if we are learning 2 languages at once, when our brain is in this malleable stage, we are expanding our abilities to speak, we are expanding our abilities to develop different concepts in this case, and then some creativity when solving problems. Once we get older, it gets tougher. Our brain kind of, I use the example of like our brain kind of hardening, even though that's not the case, but that's kind of a good way to put it. And then we'll dive into proficiency and fluency. How do we measure proficiency and fluency? Language proficiency varies on state and test standards. Of course, WIDA has their own way of measuring proficiency or how well we know a language. It can also be measured by their abilities, these students' abilities compared to their native English-speaking classmates. If we have someone who grew up speaking English, how does this student who grew up speaking Russian compare to their classmates? Are they on grade level? Stuff like that. And that's from the Hamayan and Freeman text. We also have conversational fluency versus academic fluency. And I did want to note the difference between proficiency and fluency is proficiency kind of measures fluency. And then at this point, we would go into another activity of, I could not find the exact video for this, but this is a screenshot from the lecture journal. I think this was an excellent example. This student is about in 1st grade, having a conversation in English with her teacher. She is from Honduras. She grew up speaking Spanish. She basically does really well in the small talk conversational sense, but once we start talking about biology and academic things, she falters. There are a lot of ums. She starts to get caught up in what she's saying. So that's about a 5-minute video. So then we will open up the conversation. What did you notice? Where did the girl succeed? Hopefully our participants say that, she was pretty good at the conversational aspect. And, just the small talk in the beginning about greeting each other, but then kind of faltered when it came to academic talk or academic speak and stuff like that. She was more comfortable in that first conversation for sure. And I think her confidence really impacted how she did. Her confidence faltered in the second one, where she started doing a lot of the and having to think before she said something. So was she fluent in the conversation part? Pretty much yes. Is she fluent in the academic language? No. And I would also, I didn't include this on the slide, but I probably should. I would like the counselors that I'm speaking with, I would like them to kind of notice how the teacher did, because the teacher took things very slowly and she allowed the student to talk. She was okay with kind of being quiet and silent, and when the student struggled, she didn't fill in the blanks for her. Just some little things that we can do as the adult in the room. So WIDA, we are getting into WIDA, kind of how we measure proficiency. This is in place in Florida. Our children's proficiency, it measures, like I said, those 4 pillars: speaking, writing, reading, and listening in English. They have 1 through 6, and it often determines their placement in an ESOL program. Either they will be placed in the program, they will continue the program, or at some point they can exit the program once they become proficient enough in several different areas. One of the 4 or 3 or how many areas that they need. Okay. I would like to use this as a handout. This is our WIDA workshops. This is provided by the Florida Department of Education for this school year. There are places to go in person. There are some online lessons that they do, just so teachers can become familiar with the process, and counselors. The next activity, I tried to do a screen recording, but it wouldn't allow me, but I would basically open up Focus and have everybody in the room open up Focus. They would pick a child in the school or on their roster that is a member of an ESOL program, and we would walk through how to access their WIDA scores. And then from there, we would be able to talk about some different lessons and how to identify the students who are really struggling in certain areas and things like that. So we can see, the students who are kind of struggling in listening versus maybe they're writing, they're excelling, that kind of stuff. Just so we know where the information is and we have it available. So our role as counselors, some of us may have to do WIDA administration. I know my classmate Peyton worked in St. Johns County at an elementary school, and she was in charge of WIDA, but I think they had 16 English language learners in the whole school. My school is probably at least 50% ELLs, and then we have, I would say about of those ELLs, about half of them are in an ESOL class. So I am from a very international school to where we require a whole department for ESOL and they handle administration. So it really varies from school to school, but you may play a decent role in the administration of the assessment, which usually happens in January. Our other role as counselors, we listen. A lot of these kids may not open up right away to us, but if they want to, some of them have probably been through traumatic experiences or know a family member that has been through a traumatic experience, and we need to support them, let them talk, be there to listen, all kinds of things like that. Same with they might even just have frustrations with learning English and learning in this environment. Being there like I said, a majority of the students in my school speak another language, and the ones who are still mastering English, even sitting there, letting them talk to you on Google Translate and type it out and responding to them on Google Translate, I know has made a difference for some of these kids. They just need to get things off of their chests. So our role also, we can make sure that these ELLs are screened for disabilities and properly placed in programs if needed. We can notice things like behavioral issues, concentration issues, different patterns that it's like, maybe this is not just a language barrier, maybe this is a cognitive thing that's preventing the student from succeeding. And then from there, this is another role that kind of varies school to school, but from there we can talk about to the special education department, we can contact families, get them on a plan if needed. Contacting families is a very important one. We should kind of be a liaison to the community, especially with immigrant families. My school has a pretty good portion of Ukrainian families, and a lot of them are refugees. It's been my goal this year to kind of connect with them and see what their needs are. I know they are part of a big church around here, and see what kind of resources are out there. English learning assistance, a lot of churches in Jacksonville will offer English lessons specifically for like some Spanish-speaking families. For the students, we can get them involved in clubs and sports, get them subjected to something that they're not exactly used to, but that'll break them out of their comfort zones. And then we can coordinate small groups or partnerships among students. I think that in a school like Peyton's, if she has like 5 kids from Ukraine, maybe getting them together and kind of doing a little group with those kids, or having kids from another country kind of learn from an English-speaking student and do like a mentorship. These are different programs that we can coordinate as a counselor. Okay, so bilingualism, getting back to the scientific part of how we learn different languages, the Hamayan and Freeman text equates our brains and the language acquisition process to a reservoir. We learn the basics to where our reservoir is filled up to here, then we expand that, and then when we start to learn another language, we start to export some of that information. We're translating this in our head. And then when we start to really become proficient in both, that flow of information kind of just enters and exits the reservoir a little more smoothly. Kind of a cool example, it gives you a visual. When we talk about individual student plans, I would like to highlight that our ELLs in Florida here have legal protections. A lot of this goes back to the consent decree, which I'd like to provide a copy for everybody, that was started in the 90s. These kids have all kinds of monitoring. They have student services while they're in school. They have qualified staff around them. And then they have evidence of consultation with parents is a must for us, which means that we talk to parents, or we attempted to talk to parents about the educational process for ESOL students. Students who are enrolled in an ESOL program, this is a legal protection to make sure that they do not fall behind. Some more steps continued. Yes. This is a legal process. Concentration should be on creating an equitable environment that leads to student success. Accommodations, for example, those are legal things that teachers and counselors, staff members, everybody has to adhere to. If the student needs time and a half on tests, for example, most ESOL students are given that accommodation. It has to be followed. Like in my school, we have to contact, I work in a high school, so we have to contact the ACT and the SAT when these students go in to take their tests, because they get some translated instructions, they get extra time, they get small group, but we have to follow those plans because it is part of their individual student education plans. What steps need to be? So yes, parent contact is super, super important to appropriate their individual plans. And then we need to consider parental involvement as well as their WIDA scores, cultural considerations, which I will get into in a little bit, and then screening for possible learning disabilities, because maybe there is a hang up beyond the language that's preventing these students from learning and taking away things. I'm running really long here, so I'm going to try to speed through. Our next big topic, like I said, this is going to be our nurture segment, family engagement. We would like to connect with the families, inform, ask, respect, engage, and provide. I had some notes on this, connecting with the families, using a translator if needed, informing the families using layman's terms, simple terms to describe the education process and what ESOL does for their student and what we can do for their student. Not everyone is familiar with the 504 or the engagement or the educational process. We are to ask the family what they need, ask if they have questions along the way. We are to respect cultural wishes. I'll use this example that I have a student who is from Kurdistan. He does not succeed at all in math. He has failed Algebra 1 twice. He's going to be a senior and taking Algebra 1, and it's really concerning. I have asked for consideration for him for an IEP. The family decided no. That was pretty much against their culture to have assistance or special education plans or anything like that. It sucks. I feel so bad for the child, but I have to respect their decision, and we'll do what we can without it for him. And then after this process is done, we will try to engage the family. I will show an example of a teacher's way of engaging families once these processes start, and then we're going to provide resources for anybody who needs them. Frequently asked questions, English lessons, anything parents would need. Immigration, status help, legal help, that kind of stuff. Okay, so a big part of our family engagement is culture. I come from white America. I'm now immersed in a very international school in an inner city part of Jacksonville. I'm learning a lot. I'm doing plenty of research, but the key is to be respectful of parents' needs. Like that family from Kurdistan, I can't pressure. I wish I could, but it is their decision. And I think that to boost comfortability in these meetings, I know parents are already hesitant about coming because they're unfamiliar with processes like this and sometimes distrustful. So providing an interpreter is very, very important. I don't want the family to be guessing what I'm saying. And DCPS, thankfully, has a great interpreter program, translating all kinds of stuff like that. So our next activity is this Parents in the Classroom. This is a kindergarten teacher in California who invited the parents of our English language learners to come in for the day to see what their kids go through. I thought that was excellent. I think this can be utilized in any grade. Have the parents see firsthand what their kids learn in the classroom. So, it's a 2-minute video, so pretty quick. Yeah, a vital role in the learning process. It also eases the kids' nerves when they're in there to have mom or dad there. But there are things to consider when we do invite parents or things like this, or we do try to engage parents. Remember that there are language barriers, so if translators are available, please get a translator. Please break down all those acronyms in the beginning, like the WIDA, the ELL, all those things. Please break them down and explain any kind of word that's out of the ordinary to these parents in their language. Remember that Some of these families, a majority of these families are probably immigrants, so transportation may be tough and availability. They may be working several jobs, so we need to work around their schedule. Not everybody's going to be able to come in that day that we open the classroom, so maybe we'll do an outreach night that starts at 6 p.m., something like that. Parents' levels of education. In some of my research that I've done, parents actually hesitate to get involved with the school process because they maybe didn't complete high school. Their education varies country to country. We may have countries that really, really value education, and parents keep going, and college is just the next step. And then we may have some that like the book Enrique's Journey, you have to pay to get students past 5th grade into middle school. So sometimes schooling stops there. So it may form some hesitancy. It may, they may just be unaware of the process. Some of these parents express that they get frustrated and ashamed kind of that they can't help their kids with their homework. So it's just something to consider. Their perception of education in their home country, kind of the same thing here, but another thing that they hesitate because we have a state-run Department of Education. We also have a government that is pushing illegal immigrants out. So they may assimilate school with an arm of the government, which I will go over as well. And then family dynamics. Maybe mom is the shot caller, maybe mom is the decision maker, but the student is here with aunt or uncle or dad, where if they need to get information to mom in Honduras, it might take a little while to relay that information to her. They also might be living with a distant relative who's not equipped to make educational decisions like that. So there are plenty of other things to consider, I'm sure, but these are family engagement considerations that really will go a long way, especially when families are abroad. So immigration as a whole, my school, we have a lot of immigrant children or children of immigrants. When it comes to the actual counseling and mental health aspect of the job of a school counselor, the immigration status of the child or the parent may play a big role in this, just because they might have just recently gone through something traumatic. They may be a refugee. All of these things to consider as far as the state of their mental health may hinge on their immigration status. They may have anxiety about being deported, all kinds of things that should be in the back of our minds. There are hesitation from thoughts of prejudice and discrimination. A family of an immigrant may, in their professional life, they are discriminated against, where who's to say that their child is not being discriminated against in the education system? Language differences, of course, huge thing, if not the most basic thing, so please do a translator. Perception of services, which is kind of what I got into about the arm of the government. They are concerned about deportation, immigration status, all kinds of stuff like that. If they are confiding in a counselor, who's to say that counselor is not going to go report that? They have these concerns, which kind of leads into cultural considerations and confidentiality. Confidentiality is tough, but it's something that we have to do. And then cultural considerations. There are so many families and cultures that counseling is not exactly welcome because they have that mentality of, keep it in the family. Any familial issues, we're going to keep that private, kind of thing, to where counseling is not exactly welcomed. So in order to get our parents engaged in school, not just participating, but here and engaged. This family engagement tool is really awesome, and I have a handout for everybody too. There are a few steps to take, but these are just some of the accomplishments that can really come from it. Like, parents have opportunity to voice their opinions. They can make a real difference in the way that the school operates. These can be monthly meetings. It's kind of, like I said, it's kind of a step further than a PTA or a PTO. I'm going to start one of these at my school this year. Kind of cool. And I love the idea of having families and stakeholders play a role in basically expressing what they want from us as educators. So these are some more schooling and counseling concerns, like religion, trust, confidentiality, like I said, the whole keep it in the family thing, extent of education in the home country, behavior at school for the student. I don't know how many times I have talked to parents about concerning behavior about their student, and oh, well, he doesn't act like that at home. That's not just an ELL thing, that's pretty much an everything thing. And then educational assistance, like I've mentioned before with that student from Kurdistan whose family hesitated to create an IEP. There are cultures where wearing eyeglasses is a sign of weakness. You know, it's all about perception and interpretation of things. I have this TED Talk next. So this girl talks about ways to be a better counselor for us and ways to kind of get other cultures to accept counseling as well. One of our perusal articles this semester talked about, you know, somebody told a Latina client, well, you need to go stand up to your mother. That doesn't really fly in her culture. So we need to be super cognizant of what kind of standards there are in their family, what kind of perceptions there are, that kind of stuff. And this is an 18-minute video. Our main takeaways, I have this hypothetical situation here where it's just a boy who immigrated here, has some family issues, he's 2 years behind in school, and just started picking up English. What are 3 specific things to consider about cultural differences and communication styles with this student? I'm looking for answers like, you know, I think one of the ones I mentioned was like, if mom is in another country, it's gonna take time to get things, relayed to her. As far as his success, he's probably does need to be placed and kept in an ESOL class. And then communication styles, he had a very traumatic experience, so he may have some PTSD or anxiety or distrust. Same with his family when it comes to the institutional things like education and the government. So just looking for some answers like that. It's kind of like a culmination of the slideshow. So our 3 main takeaways, which I got from our Counseling the Culturally Diverse book, chapter 20, about dealing with immigrants, or dealing with, I should not say that, counseling, school counseling, and immigrants, and children of immigrants and immigrant children. I really like to be considerate. Remember that immigrants and refugees face multiple stressors, including the stress of moving to and living in another country, learning another language, and negotiating new social, economic, political, educational, and social systems. It's often a confusing and frightening experience. Mental health providers who understand the complexities of these situations can do much to reassure clients by demystifying the process. I think I harped on that a lot about breaking down our acronyms and our educational terms and really educating parents on the American education system. Another one is do your research. In the course of assessment and diagnosis of mental disorders, take into account environmental factors, language barriers, potential exposure to discrimination and hostility, and when necessary, use skilled and knowledgeable interpreters. Very important. Yeah, can't stress enough the use of interpreters and translators, because language barriers are so important. Not to mention what these students and what these parents have been through. We can't assume. And then our third one, keep in mind differences, mostly cultural differences. Inquire about the client's beliefs regarding the cause of their difficulties. Listen for socio-political, cultural, religious, or spiritual interpretations. Understanding and validating clients' conceptualizations of presenting problems within their cultural matrix is an important aspect of providing culturally relevant services. Again, we are not going to suggest that a student stand up to their mother if that's not their culture. We're not going to push the, we're not going to push the family from Kurdistan to do the IEP. This is their decision. We are going to be considerate, but we're gonna do our research and make sure everything is kind of buttoned up. These are my references. I will attach my outline. I have talked for 36 minutes now. Starting to lose my voice, but yeah, my ultimate thing is contacting parents and making sure they understand what's going on. And then just taking all the necessary steps to respect them after that's done. Alrighty, thank you so much.